Thank you, Lloyd. We do appreciate your being here today. As he said, my name is Kirby Godsey, and I'm serving as president of the Whitsitt Society for this year. And I want you to know this is my only official act, actually, is to preside at this meeting. And but this organization really is governed and run effectively by Lloyd Allen, who serves as its executive director and secretary treasurer, and by Doug Weaver, who, along with Amy Cook, is responsible for the journal, which indeed I would underscore is worth your membership, and for that reason alone, you should belong to the Whitsitt Society to get on that mailing list. And then, of course, the person who really fostered the development of the Whitsitt Society in the first place, Buddy Sheridan, who I don't think is not here this morning, but is so identified with the Whitsitt Society. But we have this annual meeting each year at the annual meeting of the CBF, and though the times tend to vary, and this time is different than previous years, and we appreciate your finding your way here at 9 o'clock today to be part of this event. The Whitsitt Society seeks to hold up to the light individuals who have made a dramatic difference in all our lives, and certainly in Baptist life, who embody and exemplify the historic values and the historic traditions of Baptists. And we certainly are doing that today in the award that we're going to give. The focus of the annual meeting each year is the giving of the Courage Award, which we will do this morning. This award is meant to celebrate an individual who in his or her own life and labors have embodied courage in living out the convictions, even amidst conflict and at times even outrage. A couple of years ago, the Whitsitt Society honored me with that award. It was a mistake. It was richly undeserved, but today they're compensating for it, for the error of their ways, and the Whitsitt Society is honored to present the Courage Award to a gentleman who is indeed embodies the very meaning of courage, who has lived out courage in a way in which most of us could not imagine the challenge. Fred Shuttlesworth and his wife Sapphira are here this morning, and we thank them for their willingness to make the journey to be here in Memphis with us. They distinguish us and honor us with their presence for the impact that they have made in our own history, and it's history through which many of us in this room lived, and as the years go by, for which we appreciate more deeply the profound sacrifice and the profound courage and human understanding which they lived in those very difficult years. As all of us know, Fred Shuttlesworth is virtually a legendary figure in civil rights all across our country, leading the fight against racism and bigotry and segregation in Birmingham, Alabama, best known, but indeed known all over the country. But his work and his leadership and his ministry has, I think, lifted the standing of Baptists across our land. And for that, we are grateful. In a few minutes, we will have a chance. I'll have the opportunity and pleasure to introduce the biographer of Fred Shuttlesworth, who will talk with us about his life. But before I do that, we want to take a few minutes to view a brief documentary on Fred's life, and we want to begin the program this morning by showing this DVD, and then I'll introduce our speaker. So if we could have the DVD at this time.
Narration of black preachers. In December of 1955, just a year after the U.S. Supreme Court desegregated American schools, a young black seamstress named Rosa Parks was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama, for refusing to move to the back of the bus. Her arrest triggered a bus boycott and citywide demonstrations. The protest was led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and marked a turning point in the civil rights movement.
And let us remember once more, Montgomery has been thrown into a peculiar position.
A young minister named Fred Shuttlesworth came from Birmingham, Alabama to march and to join the protests. He would go on to become one of the most influential leaders of the civil rights movement and, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., one of the nation's most courageous freedom fighters.
And even in the midst of death, God is right there.
Fred Shuttlesworth was born in Alabama in 1922. As a teenager, he had two passions, to either be a doctor or a preacher.
It might be true that in the past they have had the jurisdictions, we might say, of our lives. But we claim now that we know our affairs better than anybody else knows of.
Shuttlesworth worked a variety of odd jobs while going to night school to become a minister. He was ordained in 1948, and 2 years later became the full-time pastor of the conservative First Baptist Church in Selma, Alabama.
Some of the good to arouse people, others are good to lead people.
His salary was $150 per month. In less than 3 years, he was fired. The church deacons felt he was focusing too much on the working class.
And I learned then that speaking the truth, standing for the truth, and not backing down when I know I'm right, has always brought me out in front with sincerity, with humility, and yet with obedience.
It would only take a few months for Reverend Shuttlesworth to find a church where his message was more welcomed. In March of 1953, he became the pastor of Bethel Baptist Church in Birmingham.
Bethel Church had a younger membership, less educated, more working class, more influenced by World War II experience, and thus less willing to put up with the difficulties of segregation than the older generation.
By 1955, Southern black preachers like Reverend Shuttlesworth were speaking out openly against the segregation. So when Rosa Parks sat down in the front of the bus in Montgomery, Shuttlesworth
fear you operate. All of us are in danger, you know. All of us expected to get killed. In fact, they thought I'd get killed for anybody.
Throughout 1956, while the Montgomery bus boycott continued, Reverend Shuttlesworth became more active and outspoken back home in Birmingham when the first African-American student tried to register at the University of Alabama. Shuttlesworth was there when the black community demanded the removal of segregation signs in public facilities. He was there when protesters demanded the hiring of black bus drivers. He was there.
I have backed down from what I believe ought to be said. I have always followed what I thought the scriptures taught and believing in the power of God to sustain me, to keep me moving on in the way I should go. I have always been a victim.
Almost a year later, the Supreme Court put an end to segregated buses in Montgomery. But this major civil rights victory was greeted all over Alabama with a swift and hostile reaction. A reaction that culminated in the 1956 Christmas Day bombing of Reverend Shuttlesworth's Birmingham home.
To the corner off the house, to the wall between my head and the down. In fact, the only thing was between my head and down, I was the wall of the house, before it was. The bricks still there, and I cracked it. Bethel Baptist Church. But it went off. But it tore the house off.
He emerged with an absolute certain conviction that God had saved thee to lead the fight. A member of his church said, if we had seen Jesus walk on water, we could not have been more reverent than we were when we saw him walk out of that house alive.
The bombing of his home didn't alter Reverend Shuttlesworth's commitment to desegregation. In September 1957, news cameras covered Shuttlesworth as he enrolled his two daughters at the all-white Phillips High School, a decision that nearly cost him his life.
A mob of about 15 young toughs began beating him as close to death as he ever got. In the midst of this, he heard a voice saying, not yet, that this is not your time.
It's wonderful to know how much strength you can get when you're so near death. Well, I came in there twice today, but I couldn't faint, where I was beaten and kicked, hit over the head with chains. But God preserved me alive, and I'm going to stay here and leave this battle. I don't propose to leave Birmingham. Alabama is my home. We can't run away from our problems. We must open our eyes and start working forward towards some solution to meet it.
In the same way as John Jasper and the others before him, Reverend Shuttlesworth's commitment to equality would motivate the next generation of black preachers.
Obviously a moving documentary. That's a part of a larger piece regarding black preaching and the impact that they've had, but certainly leading with Fred Shuttlesworth is an indication of the role and significant role in leadership that he played. I'm especially pleased to present this morning the biographer of Fred Shuttlesworth, Dr. Andrew Maness. Andy Maness, we know him as Associate Professor of History at Macon State College in Macon, Georgia. He holds degrees from Samford University and the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, where he earned a PhD in American religious history. He also studied at the University of Chicago School of Divinity and previously taught at Avery College in Danville, Virginia. And he was the first Protestant ever to teach in the theology department at Xavier University in New Orleans. He is the author of numerous articles and books the one which we're focusing on today, which I have a copy of here, is the biography of Fred Shuttlesworth, A Fire You Can't Put Out. And he's also books, including this book, the Civil Rights Life of Birmingham's Fred Shuttlesworth. This book won the 2000 Lillian Smith Book Award, among others. His recent book, Macon, Black and White, An Unutterable Separation in the American Century, won him the 2005 Georgia Author of the Year Award, and also was a finalist for the Robert F. Kennedy Book Award. Andy has received numerous grants and fellowships, including the Mellon Fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, and he was just recently named as a Fulbright Scholar, under which auspices he'll be teaching in Greece during the next year. And he's an active churchman, a member of Vineville Baptist Church in Macon, where he is a deacon, occasionally preaches in Georgia, Middle Georgia in particular. His wife, Linda, is a consultant with the Georgia Department of Labor, and their daughter, Megan, attended Georgia State College and University. We're delighted to have to speak about Fred Shuttlesworth this morning, the biographer of Fred Shuttlesworth, Dr. Andy Maness. Andy?
What a happy occasion it is to be back among a number of my classmates and persons who I have hung out with in libraries and classrooms and chapel. And I don't get to the CBF very often, and so it's great to see many of you. And of course, it is a great privilege, one of the high privileges of my life, to be asked to tell you some reasons why you have done a good thing in honoring Fred Shuttlesworth with the 2008 William Whitsitt Courage Award. I've known Fred Shuttlesworth for 30 years. I said last night, it doesn't seem right that I can remember things that happened 30 years ago. And also remember being an adult when they happened. But we met in 1978. A generation apart, he and I had both grown up in Birmingham. He in an area known as Oxmoor, I in a section called Southside. Color and race prejudice, of course, separated us much more than age and a few miles of physical space did. But oddly enough, what brought us together in 1978, believe it or not, was Baptist history. He had made quite a bit of it, and I was trying to write a small piece of it. I was a first-year student at what used to be a Baptist seminary in Louisville, writing a paper on Martin Luther King in Buddy Sheridan's Baptist history class. One weekend, while I was working on that piece, I visited my uncle in Cincinnati, where I learned that he was the building contractor for the Greater New Light Baptist Church, where, as it happened, Fred Shuttlesworth was the pastor. A phone call was placed, and within an hour, although we didn't know it at the time, the relationship between biographer and his subject was born in my uncle's living room. A civil rights icon living so near a Southern Baptist seminary. Who could imagine such a thing? Passing on this information to a couple of professors led to an invitation, and that fall I was asked to introduce Fred Shuttlesworth to an audience in Alumni Chapel. I'll never forget seeing Roy Honeycutt and Frank Stagg doing a belly laugh in response to one of Reverend Shuttlesworth's quips. And I've been introducing him ever since, probably 10 or 12 times over the years. I also spent 75 hours or so interviewing him for the book, used up another 12 years researching and writing that book, wrote over 400 pages in telling his story. Obviously, on the subject of Fred Shuttlesworth, I tend toward long-windedness, but I promise I will try to fight the urge to tell you everything I know, because the sooner I sit down, the sooner you will have the opportunity to come up and shake the hand of the unsung hero whose activities changed our entire nation and pushed all of us and pushed the United States a few steps closer to what Martin Luther King called the beloved community and what Jesus called the kingdom of God. This morning I could tell you that his historical importance holds true despite the fact that many people have never heard of him, and that he is indeed the embodiment of an unsung hero. I could tell you that without the 1965 Voting Rights Act, black freedom could not be protected in this country. And that there would be no Voting Rights Act without the Selma to Montgomery March, that there would have been no Selma to Montgomery March without the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended legal segregation in all of American life. I could tell you that there would have been no Civil Rights Act without President Kennedy's having introduced that legislation in June of 1963. That President Kennedy would not have introduced that legislation if the Birmingham demonstrations had not happened in April and May of that year. And I could tell you that there would have been no 63 demonstrations. No film footage for us to watch every January. No dogs, no fire hoses, no filling the jails, no children fighting for the freedom of their parents and their future children, without the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, which laid the groundwork for those demonstrations with 7 years of effort. I could tell you that there would have been no Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights without its president, its founder, and its very soul, the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth. I could tell you that, but that's not what I want to emphasize today. Or I could tell you that he went to Selma University. Some of that you've already heard. And that until fairly recent, health problems. He spoke on college campuses across the country. Or I could tell you that up until a year or so ago, he was actively as pastor of Greater New Light Baptist Church, beginning in 1966. I could tell you that he served from 1953 to 61 as the pastor of Birmingham's Bethel Baptist Church, which was bombed 3 times for its involvement in the civil rights struggle in Birmingham. I could also tell you that he was one of the founding members and officers of Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference. These are minor details. Oh, and I could also tell you that he was the recipient of a Presidential Citizens Award given to him by President Bill Clinton a few days before President Clinton left office. Now, of course, the name of the award that you have given him demands that I tell you about his courage. And nobody, and I mean nobody, put his rear end on the line in the black freedom struggle more than Shuttlesworth did in Birmingham. I could tell you that he often said, and has said in the years since, I tried to get killed in Birmingham, which of course led a lot of people, both white and black, to wonder about his sanity. I could tell you how he actually survived 16 sticks of dynamite and how that didn't stop him, how the tirades of Bull Connor And the occasional timidity of Dr. King didn't slow him down. How water hoses in Birmingham did not hold him down. I could tell you that after the first bombing, he was convinced, as were his followers, that when they saw Fred Shuttlesworth survive that bombing, they were watching a modern-day Daniel in the lion's den. The next year, you saw it depicted in the video of the episode of his being beaten as he tried to enroll his children at Phillips High School. There's a front story or a back story to that the video didn't tell. A few days before he announced that he was going to enroll his kids at that school, Birmingham Klansmen abducted and castrated a young black male named Judge Aaron, leaving him for dead on the side of the road. But before they left him with the message that the same treatment awaited blacks who tried to integrate the schools in Birmingham. Now, there was little question that Shuttlesworth was the intended recipient of the message because, after all, he was the only one trying to integrate the schools in Birmingham at that time. And so, on the appointed day, in spite of that threat, Shuttlesworth showed up at Phillips, and you saw what happened. The nation didn't give very much attention to that event, however, because it happened in September of 1957, on the same day that Little Rock Central High was being integrated for the first time, and troops were called out, and of course that was more of the national focus at the time. So it's almost as if events have always conspired to try to keep the message or keep the knowledge of Fred Shuttlesworth in some ways out of the limelight. You saw the comments he made after that beating. The Reverend Shuttlesworth's first wife, Ruby, was trying to help him get away from the thugs who were beating him, and in the process, she was stabbed in the buttocks, really, while this was going on, and didn't realize this took place until she got to the hospital and saw blood. So the comments were that when it was all over, the minister said, "This is the price one pays for freedom." And the minister's wife said the only thing that bothered her about the whole matter was that modesty would not permit her to show off her scar at the next mass meeting. I could tell another story about that typifies, in some sense, his spirit, and in some ways, directly why the book was named what it was named. At a mass meeting one Monday night in 1959, there was another interruption. This had been going on for several weeks. Every mass meeting on Monday night was being interrupted by the fire department with the claims that someone had reported that there was a fire hazard and the buildings needed to be evacuated. This was Bull Connor's way of interrupting the meetings. And on this particular occasion, they were meeting at St. James Baptist Church, and once again the wail of sirens drowned out the voices from the pulpit. And in the middle of this, the firefighters and the fire chief showed up in the sanctuary and asked them to leave. Shuttlesworth stepped to the microphone and said, "Gentlemen, what are you looking for?" And here again, they said there was a report of a fire. Fred knew what was going on, that this was simply an effort of stampeding the meeting. And so he was rather agitated and replied, "Now, Chief, we're just as tired as hell of Bull Connor harassing us, and we're ready, all of us, to go to jail if this is what Bull is trying to pull today. And if Bull's got enough room in his jail, we're ready to go. We're tired of this. We're not going to move." Oh no, Reverend, this is no trick. And so, finally the minister gave in. "Chief, can you assure me this isn't Bull harassing us? Because if this is Bull, we're staying. You're going to have to drag us out." Got one more promise from the fire chief, and as they were leaving to go to a church down the street, Shuttlesworth got in one last zinger. "Y'all think there's a fire in here? You know there ain't no fire in here. The kind of fire we got in here you can't put out with hoses and axes." And I can tell you a story that would make William Whitsitt proud. A couple of years ago, a number of historians were invited to conduct a roundtable discussion with the board members of the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati. These historians were assigned to sit at tables and talk to various community leaders about why a museum about slavery was important. And many of them were saying all the right things, and they did, there were a number of these people who were saying, well, we want to have this kind of museum, but we don't want it to dwell on the negative. We want to tell a progressive story that would uplift young people and leave families feeling proud. So after some time discussing this kind of stuff, Yale historian David Blight noticed that Reverend Shuttlesworth hadn't said anything. And as pesky professors often do, Dr. Blight called on Fred to make some sort of comment. Knowing Shuttlesworth's role in the freedom struggle, Blight and the rest of the audience waited as Shuttlesworth finally broke his silence with one powerful sentence. "If you don't tell it like it was, it can never be as it ought to be." That may be the best advice I have ever heard for both preachers and historians. If you don't tell it like it was, it can never be as it ought to be. And that's especially so for white preachers whose track record in speaking out on race has been and remains abysmal. But all that is still not what I want most to say about him this morning. No, what I want to say about him this morning is much simpler than that. I want to simply say that he must have learned in Sunday school at the St. Matthew AME Church in Oxmoor, Alabama, probably seven and a half decades ago. He must have taken to heart that little spiritual that goes, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine." And shine it has. Enough to illuminate the evils of segregation. Enough to illuminate the silliness of human separation. Enough to illuminate the foolishness of turning color or culture into a god. Enough to illuminate the self-destructiveness of violence and hate. And those areas which I've just mentioned, those areas of human darkness that he has helped illuminate, he has worked a lifetime to eliminate. Because that little light of his was lit with a fire you can't put out. Fred Shuttlesworth has held forth that little light of his, and he has tried to lead the people in his care, and he has tried to lead a nation that often didn't care. He has faithfully taken that little light of his, and he has tried to lead us all toward the beloved community. Now, the true, honest to God reality is that in spite of how much his work has changed our nation, we still have a long way to go to reach the beloved community. And the reality of sin being what it is, we probably will never find it. But as one of my historian friends, Mills Thornton, has reminded us, more often than not, nobility lies precisely in being unwilling to accept reality. Because a place where no one was willing to make it truly beloved would be a community too awful to contemplate. So here we are, Fred, expressing our gratitude to God for your life, for your ministry, and of course for your courage, both in the pulpit and in the streets. Here we are, right behind you, still seeking a city that has foundations, whose maker and builder is God. So one more time, our honored brother, we thank you for that little light of yours, that you have let it shine, and that you have shown us where to look for the kingdom of God.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is our distinct honor today to present the Courage Award. Let me read it to you, to a man of faith and a man of spiritual and moral power, and certainly a man of courage. Whitsitt Baptist Heritage Society, William H. Whitsitt Courage Award, presented to the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, June 19, 2008, dedicated to Baptist bravery in Baptist individuals who have lived out the Baptist ideals of freedom and faith in the face of any and all would-be tyrannies. Reverend Shuttlesworth, you honor us today by accepting this award. In just a moment, we're going to see if we can take questions you may have. We want to see if we can get a microphone over to him. This one's on, but I don't know that it will read.
Thank you. I'm not here to show how brave I am. Thank God for using me and moving forward the standards of bravery and courage, and for letting him use me. And I'm here to say to my brothers and sisters, what a great thing it is to stand up for God in a serious time. I don't have a whole lot to say. Standing up is saying God wants all of us to do. And I'm thankful today for the little bit of history that I have contributed to. And so, all of us have a little bit more that we can do and give. And I'm thank God for you. And so and just thank God for all of us who have carried forward the torch a little bit further. May God bless you and honor you and be good to you. Here's my prayer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Shuttlesworth, for joining us today. Again, you honor this society by accepting this award. Let me see, we have just a very few minutes, but are there questions that people would, or comments people would like to make? Andy is here to be happy to respond to comments that he's made.
Can you give us the quote again? If you can't tell it like it was, what was the rest of that?
It's, well, if you hadn't asked. If you don't tell it like it was, it can never be as it ought to be. At the risk of shameless self-promotion, I'll tell you that there are some copies of A Fire You Can't Put Out. My student Brandon Smith, and pastor of a church in Jackson, Georgia, is back there, and if you are interested in getting a copy, we'll be happy to let you have one. I'm not sure if you can get a signature. Is that possible? Okay. Certainly, the author will be happy to sign, and I think the subject can do as well. If any comments or questions? Yes?
Did he ever think about giving it up and saying it wasn't worth it, that just to go along with what many others were saying, they were advocating?
I think the answer to that is will be a resounding no. Do you? I think Fred wants to reply to that.
Did you ever think about doing that?
Fire you can't put out. You can't put it out. So the answer is no.
I'm just going to pass all the questions to him because I've long since learned that he will put it in perspective and put it in a form that you can handle it a lot better than I can. If you have comments or expressions of gratitude that you'd like to say to him, either publicly or when we're done here, I certainly would invite you to do that.
Let me, yes, you have one question. We're about out of time. Yes.
I just have a comment. I plan to say this privately, but I think I'd like to say it to the group. My daughter was introduced to you in a civil rights history class her freshman year in college. And you have been her hero from that day on. And I'm largely here this morning to shake your hand, to go back home and shake her hand. She wants to talk to somebody who's touched Fred Shuttlesworth.
Thank you. I know many of you will want to take a moment to speak to Fred, and our time is almost up. I want, Doug Weaver, as you know, puts out this journal, and I wanted to mention that Fred also will be, Doug also will be signing books. His new book is called In Search of New Testament Church. Doug, when and where is that book signing? Tonight? Okay, after worship this evening. So be aware of that. And I was going to mention about this book, A Fire You Can't Put Out, but Andy's mentioned it, so those would be available as well. Again, we thank you for coming this morning. Lloyd, do you have anything else? And I want to introduce you to your new president, Melissa Rogers, is the new president of the Whitsitt Society. Welcome, Melissa. Thank you so much for being here, and Fred and Fasara Shuttlesworth, we thank you all for coming as well. Andy, thank you for bringing his work in such vivid display this morning. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.